We're live on X. I just confirmed it.
That was fast.
Do I have enough time to clean my spectacles?
You got plenty of time.
That was tight. Guess what it is?
Dan Wilson is opening his Foley soundstage.
Foley soundstage. That's correct. Kid that I grew up with, his grandfather worked for Foley Studios. Really cool.
Are you serious?
Okay, this is a special Idaho run of Buffalo Trace. You can only get it in Idaho. Sazerac Barrel Select 90 proof.
Oh, nice.
Buffalo Trace. Here you go.
Oh, you're going to take some heat for that. 90 proof.
Cheers.
Thank you. People are already getting all bent out of shape in the comments section today.
Yawn. Double yawn.
Willie Everlearn joined us nice and early tonight before the live stream even began. Do us a favor if you jumped on early before we're on screen. We're here live. Share this feed to your page or profile so more people in our community, even around the nation, they can learn. They can learn from Kootenai County as a template. But share this feed so that more of you can get involved.
Nice.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, maybe not so nice. That's before I even tapped the 90 proof.
You should have sipped some whiskey a little earlier.
You know what? Actually, yeah, that was the problem. Hold on, just a second.
Hold on.
Hold on.
I may have to go buy another bottle of that.
That's smooth. You ready to be on camera? Say hi. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Liberty Without Compromise live stream broadcast brought to you by the Liberty Without Compromise Network. We are the show where we challenge assumptions. Some of you making some assumptions today. We ask tough questions and encourage you to think for yourself. We're your hosts, Dan and Donna Wilson. Thank you for spending part of your Wednesday evening with us. I know the weather's nice and other things you could be doing. A reminder, if you're watching live, let us know where you're joining us from. Right there in the comment section, let us know. We'd also appreciate it if you take just a second to share this broadcast. Really helps us reach more people who are looking for conversations that you're just simply not going to find anywhere else. You can join us on YouTube, Facebook, X, and Instagram. And if you miss any part of tonight's show, the replay is going to be available immediately after the live stream, so you can share whenever it is you happen to be watching. A reminder that opinions expressed are ours only, not necessarily that of our guests, affiliates, or sponsors. Tonight, we're tackling two topics that both come down to one singular question. How much power are we willing to hand over? And from what I'm seeing, a lot of you are willing to hand over power. I don't get it. And who should be trusted to exercise that power? We'll start by discussing government surveillance, emergency powers, and a little-known CDC planning document from the COVID era. that has many Americans asking whether the infrastructure being built today could someday be used in ways most people never imagined. We've imagined it. We're imagining it. That's why bells and whistles are going off. Technology changes, government changes, leadership changes. The question is, do the safeguards keep up with how rapidly those things change?
Yeah.
Then we're going to be joined by Kaylee Peterson, who's challenging Congressman Russ Fulcher for Idaho's 1st Congressional District. Some of you, your hair's already on fire over this one. Whether you've supported Russ Fulcher and Terry Seymour.
We love you, Bob.
Whether you've supported Russ Fulcher for years or you're simply beginning to pay attention in this race, as well you should, tonight is an opportunity to hear directly from somebody asking voters to send her to Washington instead. As always, we don't endorse candidates, but our goal is to give you the opportunity to hear ideas firsthand, ask questions, and decide for yourself. And like Dan Wilson would say, we can talk to whoever the hell we want to talk to.
True thing.
Go grab your favorite beverage. Yes, also your popcorn. Jump into the comments and let's go ahead and get started. This is Liberty Without Compromise, and here's your host, Dan Wilson.
Episode 83. What a last 7 days since we last saw you. There's been quite a lot of destruction in the greater Spokane area. Of course, August 1st, Saturday, just a few short days ago, 3 fires were started in around Spokane, and with extremely high winds, it was a recipe for disaster. Tonight, the Liberty Without Compromise broadcast sends our heartfelt wishes, support, and prayers for all of those that have been affected, either directly or indirectly, by extended family, friends, and loved ones. Over 640 structures lost. Devastation that we have not seen in this section of the country for a very long time. And if that wasn't bad enough, the same day was a active killer. We don't call them active shooters. We call them what they are. Active killers, active murderer, who shot and killed 3 citizens down in Twin Falls. Now, if there can be any good news out of that event, there were 2, as I am understanding, 2 citizens that took their firearms and engaged the suspect. It's pretty important that everyone always remember that you can't believe that just because you're in sleepy Idaho or your safe county or city or state of choice, you always have to be vigilant and ready to protect life if you are so inclined to do so. That is one of the great things about being an American, as guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, our right to be armed, our right to self-defense, and that extends to hold an out-of-control, unaccountable government at bay. Our founders were brilliant men. Our Bill of Rights are very much under attack right now. The First Amendment and Fourth Amendment, especially these days. I could argue the Fifth and the Sixth as well. But during the weekend, our former guest, and he will be back on again, Dr. John Padfield, had his brush fire tour hit Spokane Saturday morning. There was about 50 to 60 people that filled the auditorium in that North Spokane church. And John's message was one that really motivated me and encouraged me as well. We had the privilege of spending several hours with John later on, got to know him a lot more. He is a brilliant man. We're looking forward to here in the very short future to have a X space where we're going to have John and some others that have been previous guests on a roundtable so we can discuss with you, the audience, all things surveillance state, flock cameras, ALPRs, data centers, you name it. But the one thing that holds true is that eternal vigilance is your duty as an American if you wish to remain free. And remember, you must fight all times to keep your liberty, and you must do so without compromise. It's your turn now.
It's my,
I just kind of felt like ending it right there.
You're like, that needed a pause. Okay, well, since Dan needed a little sip of Buffalo Trace there, I'm going to remind you that one of his favorite products as of late, and a new affiliate of ours here on Liberty Without Compromise, is ALP, offering these nicotine pouches that can sometimes be a touchy subject on certain platforms. We're gonna do this as long as we can, but no smoke, no spit, no compromise. Tell us a little bit about those ALP pouches. I know you're trying to get a break from talking, but while Dan is coming up with, he's going to explain why these are so great. I'm going to point you to that QR code because you can scan there to shop anything on the ALP website. And they've got different products, including caffeine pouches, and you can buy these in special bundles. You're going to get a discount here by using this QR code. And it's a simple way of helping to support the program. So what are your thoughts there on those ALP pouches, Wilson?
Well, look, it's not like I have used a lot of nicotine pouches. When I was a kid, it was either Skoal, Copenhagen, longleaf tobacco. You're spitting all the time. But recently, I decided to ditch Zins. I was never really a fan of Zins, which is tobacco-less nicotine pouches. So there's no tobacco in it, but there is nicotine. And I tried the Alps, and I have to say that I really like them. I get 20 of those soft little moist pouches in each can. The flavor lasts a long time. I hit them in my morning walk. I'm up at 4 a.m. I do my half-hour walk outside. I pop one in. When I get back to the gym, I pop in another one.
What? Oh.
I use it all the way through the workout. And when I can't smoke a cigar, which is unfortunately all too often, I'm not in an environment where I can smoke a stick. I'd smoke them one after another if I could.
Yeah.
And when I can't do that, that's when I reach for the ALP.
And you know what, ladies, these ALP pouches, no bad breath. They're tobacco free. So you don't have, there's no disgusting spit, things stuck in your teeth, no staining of the teeth, because that is not what nicotine does. And I'm going to give you a little helpful hint. Nicotine acts as an amazing and natural appetite suppressant.
Really?
Just putting that out there.
Wish it worked on me.
Yeah. So if you're doing keto or working to cut carbs and you just need something to help you get over that hump, they come in really great flavors. There are a lot there to choose from. So sometimes there's just that stigma when it comes to nicotine, but this is a great option. Kind of helps keep your,
I don't know
if you ever have like
here.
a dry mouth situation, I think it helps a whole lot with that too. Yeah.
This is the one I picked up today. It is the watermelon kiwi ice.
What?
I had one of these in.
Me.
It lasted me a good 2.5 hours.
Oh yeah. So yeah, those flavors last a long time. So I'm going to put this card up again on the screen so you can scan that QR code, give you another few seconds to do that while we're still talking. And a reminder, we've got Kaylee Peterson. She's running for Congress District 1 against Russ Fulcher. And like I said, some of you had your hair on fire already there in the comment section. So if you've joined us and you're like, why aren't they talking about that yet? It's coming up. We have a very long, like quite in-depth, and a conversation with her that I am very much looking forward to. Just a highly intelligent young woman. Looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah, indeed.
What else you got for us, Wilson?
So let's talk about the fires and the shooting. Now, they happened both at the same time. Both of these incidents involved, obviously, man-made disasters. The shooter in Twin Falls acted accordingly. He terrorized people. He killed. He's a murderer. And in Spokane, they have one suspect they've arrested who they are accusing of starting one of the fires. I think it's the Old Trails fire. I really don't know all the details. I've read some things about it, but here's two things to consider. Twin Falls in the state of Idaho is one of the most heavily surveilled cities right now. DFLOC Idaho has gone to battle against these cameras, mostly Flock, The police department down there loves them. And Spokane City is also equally heavy on the flock cameras and the live crime center. So here's a question. Here are two extremely horrible, catastrophic events, similar but different. Where were the ALPRs to stop the mass murderer down in Twin Falls? It's a question that should be asked of the chief of police and the city council and those that are truly pushing and promoting these cameras as a way to solve crimes, to prevent crimes. What about Spokane? Oh, I know. When you have guys that are on foot and you don't know who they are and they don't have a license plate attached with them, they can slip by these ALPRs unless they have facial recognition. So be looking now for law enforcement to be making the plea that, if we just had facial recognition. Now, I don't know much about the Twin Falls suspect who is now deceased, so I can't comment much about his previous history, but they're claiming that the arsonist in one of the Spokane fires has a lengthy history, including serving time for killing his father over some domestic dispute. Somebody said his dad was making him wash dishes, and that led him to murder his father. I've also heard reports that just last year, the same suspect was contacted by officials and law enforcement for attempting to start fires. It comes down to this one same argument, which is whether or not ALPRs and the surveillance state is truly for our benefit to protect us, because that's really what they want to do. Is they claim that they don't want to surveil us. They just want to protect us from bad people and bad things. And yet here we are, 640 plus homes or structures gone, hundreds of people displaced, racking the local economy, completely devastating resources. One man. When you hear the arguments about how great these systems are, remember these two stories. Horrible things that took place, and yet one man was not stopped in Spokane by ALPRs, nor was an active murderer in Twin Falls. These are some things to consider tonight as we go down and talk again about what is on everyone's minds around the country. Now, I know there's a lot of things going on with Iran. I know things are going on with the economy. I know that there are a lot of national things that are also important, but surveillance state, as well as the data centers and everything that is part of this big government, is like a brush fire. Now, John Padfield had his lecture on Saturday. I would highly encourage you, if you have not already done so, you really need to go to his YouTube page, Business Reform. It has a lot of videos breaking down the different aspects of the surveillance state, cameras, hardware, software, as well as history on the American people and the Bill of Rights and what it means to be secure in your person, places, and effects. Now, John is going to culminate all of this, I believe, on August 18th down in Georgia, where there's going to be a huge anti-deflock conference along with Ben Jordan, and others. I believe that they're going to live stream this. When we get that link, we're going to share it with you guys, because you need to see what's going on. You need to see that this is not a right versus left, Democrat versus Republican issue. This is truly about those that support and defend the Bill of Rights versus those who want to throw it all away, their dangerous liberty, for a little bit of security. It was a great time with John, and I really appreciate that he has put this on. He's traveled many states over the past 2 weeks, and he definitely is worth following. So again, if you get the opportunity, or make the time to go look up his work and to start educating yourself, because it allows you to fight the narrative that you're hearing from those that say we have nothing to fear. If you are not hiding anything, if you're not committing any crimes, you have nothing to fear. We're going to learn exactly why you have something to fear. Now, flock cameras. We know that we have been subject to immediately being inundated, surrounded by these cameras, especially since President Trump took office back in 2025. I continually hear the arguments of law enforcement day in and day out. I get the messages, I get the DMs, I get the emails, I get the phone calls. Fear-mongering. It's just the latest thing to take control for those of you that just want to be anti-government. You're unreasonable. Nothing is going to happen. The good guys are in charge. We're going to watch a 12-minute video. We're going to stop it every once in a while and comment. But I'm going to take you back down memory lane to 2020. When we were told a lot of things, many of us were coerced to do things. Many of us were threatened if we did things or did not comply. We're going to talk about why this argument that all they're doing with these cameras, whether it's Motorola, Axon, or Flock, they're just capturing images. And your data is secure. It's not being used for any nefarious reasons. Why that does not hold any water. Let's take a look down this memory lane. I want you guys to remember the tyranny that we faced in 2020 when they attempted, those that wanted to usurp the Bill of Rights, what they attempted to do in 2020. Let's go and take a look at what happens with compliant and non-compliant peoples.
Thank you. So I'm glad to see that you're practicing social distancing. That looks very nice. That's very good. I want to thank everybody for being here today. This morning I spoke with the leaders of the G7 nations, and they really had a good meeting. I think it was a very, very productive meeting. I also spoke with our nation's governors. And this afternoon we're announcing new guidelines for every American to follow over the next 15 days as we combat the virus. Each and every one of us has a critical role to play.
But not everyone is obeying those orders.
He cut him off!
Yep, this paddleboarder was arrested after refusing to get out of the water in Malibu. CBS 2's Amy Johnson has more on the showdown near the sand.
It's a stand-up paddle pursuit.
A paddleboarder is chased down by law enforcement for being out on the water at Malibu Beach.
Oh, he faked him out. Now he's going back out to sea.
All LA County beaches are closed due to the coronavirus and social distancing after crowds gathered on LA beaches early in the crisis.
Sheriff boat.
The incident caught on camera as the paddleboarder was taken into custody for disobeying a lifeguard, and a surfer was cited.
These days, public spaces are closed for a reason. It's to stop the spread of COVID-19. And one mom found out the hard way. Officials are serious about it. As Diane McInerney reports, she was arrested and charged with trespassing for entering a closed city playground.
Controversy erupts as a mom was arrested in a playground closed due to the pandemic.
Officer, you don't want to do that.
The arrest of a Meridian woman has sparked backlash.
I feel like I was singled out because I was the only person that was arrested.
The incident happened at a park in Meridian, Idaho, where anti-lockdown parents reportedly sent out this plea on social media. There are a bunch of us taking our kids to the park to tear the tape off the playground. Let's take a stand.
Police say they went to the playground after receiving several calls about what was taking place.
They say when they got there, caution tape and metal signs stating that the playground was closed had been removed, and they repeatedly informed everyone it was time to clear out.
Under what grounds?
I just told you. We can close it any time.
I didn't hear you. You don't need to talk to me rude. I'm just a mom with my kids.
Then things come to a head.
You have 5 seconds. 3.
Arrest me for being in the car. Do it. Report it.
Okay, this is not. Officer, you don't want to do that.
As the mom is led away, others protest.
He is arresting her for being on a public playground.
In a statement, cops say mom of 2, Sarah Brady, was charged with trespassing after failing to adhere to the rules in these very trying times.
She was asked to disperse the area and failed to do so on numerous occasions.
You guys remember that? Remember when the president came out, said he talked to all of his global partners, and they're going to have a 15 days to stop the spread, which we now know turned into weeks and months, and in some parts of the country, years. Our own governor in Idaho refused to give up the emergency powers because of funding. You have the population that was told across the entire country, you have to stay home. Social distance, 6 feet. Don't gather in groups, as our now sheriff, then candidate for Sheriff Bob Norris, reminded all of the citizens here on the campaign trail that he has driven around Kootenai County and observed people meeting in groups larger than 10 people. You weren't allowed to see your loved ones who were in the hospital. My business partner had a bypass surgery, surprise heart attack, in the hospital alone. Some of you had family members that died that you weren't allowed to see. Some of you weren't able to see your children graduate or go to weddings or to visit your loved ones in hospice or retirement home. I myself missed seeing my oldest daughter graduate from Naval Boot Camp. That was robbed of me and Donna. I know all of you have stories like this. And you were told that this virus was so dangerous, the experts, they trust the science because all of our betters know what's good for us. They told us, you must keep your hair salons closed. You must keep your small restaurant closed. Businesses that are mom and pop operations. If you had a restaurant, you had to have such space between patrons that many businesses went bankrupt. And while they shut your business down, they still allowed Costco to stay open, Home Depot, Lowe's. If you were big corporations, you found workarounds. We saw just a second ago 2 extremes. California and the LA area, which is largely considered to be a very liberal area of the country, arresting a surfer in Malibu because he was prohibited, like all other citizens, from going outside and being in the water. He was alone, but look what the good little boot jack thugs, the orders that they were just merely obeying. The guy is breaking some kind of an edict, some emergency law. And then you have the other extreme. You have conservative Idaho, ground zero for liberty. Mom saying, screw you guys, I don't care. We pay for these parks. Our kids are suffering. They need to go out and play. And again, that thug, that sergeant, he is a thug. I'd tell him to his face if I ever run into him. That thug, as he counted from 4, 3, 2, 1, And then he put his hands on her and put handcuffs on and arrested her for refusing to leave the playground. But it was for her good. It was for the good of everyone else. So the disease did not spread, right? Right? Oh, unless you're part of BLM and Antifa. And then you can walk arm in arm and wear a mask if you want to, even if it's only to conceal your identity, as they looted and burned and destroyed billions of dollars of infrastructure. But we can't touch them because it's a First Amendment issue. But if you want to go to church, you can't because it's too dangerous and your First Amendment rights are not protected. It was arbitrary, state by state, county by county, city by city. And we know that there was even conflict right here in Coeur d'Alene versus the county and Panhandle Health. Luckily, the citizens of Kootenai County said, screw you. And they eventually opened up much sooner. But it's for your good. And law enforcement was there to make sure that you were obeying the law. I'm going to continue.
I will sign an executive order that will now require all executive branch federal employees to be vaccinated. All. And I've signed another executive order that will require federal contractors to do the same. If you want to work with the federal government and do business with us, get vaccinated. If you want to do business with the federal government, vaccinate your workforce. And tonight, I'm removing one of the last remaining obstacles that make it difficult for you to get vaccinated. The Department of Labor will require employers with 100 or more workers to give those workers paid time off to get vaccinated. No one should lose pay in order to get vaccinated or take a loved one to get vaccinated. Today, in total, the vaccine requirements in my plan will affect about 100 million Americans, 2/3 of all workers. My message to unvaccinated Americans is this: what more is there to wait for? What more do you need to see? We've made vaccinations free, safe, and convenient. The vaccine has FDA approval. Over 200 million Americans have gotten at least one shot. We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
We have essentially.
Okay. I get actually physically angry when I watch clips like this last one. POTUS, the most powerful man arguably in the world. What does he say? Get vaccinated. If you want to be a federal employee, you must put a substance into your body that has been given an emergency bypass without years of clinical testing, emergency use authorization. If you work for the federal government, and I know several of you watching work for the federal government and those that are federal contractors, I happen to be a federal contractor because I work on federal projects. You will not, you have a choice to, but you will take this vaccine, this mRNA into your body if you want to be able to continue to earn a living. And in addition to this executive order, not a law, but an executive order, he then ordered his Secretary of Labor to order companies with over 100 employees to pay and allow their employees to go get vaccinated. Again, it's a freaking choice. If you want to go do that, good on you. But government now comes in and tells the employers, you're not only going to make time for your employees, but you're also going to pay them for that time. Kind of like when You can't collect rent for 3 or 4 months, but you have to pay the mortgage. Government intrusion once again.
I don't know if you recall what he said, at least at the end of that clip. I don't know that he was done saying what he was saying because it is a soundbite from his presentation, Biden's. But he said, our patience is wearing thin.
Exactly.
I don't know if you were heading
I was,
into
indeed.
that one.
That's a very, very good statement.
That when you said this makes me physically sick watching it, that was...
My patience is going to run thin if you refuse to get an enhanced driver's license. If you refuse to submit your biometrics to fly domestically in the United States, our patience is growing thin.
Who's our? Who's he talking about?
The federal government.
Well, yeah.
All those scoundrels that forced.
The point is, if that is not a scary statement to you, I don't know that one can be presented to you because you are being threatened.
Yeah. Let's take a look and see what Governor Jay Inslee had to say.
Actually, what is a new virus at our throats? A new virus that is twice as transmittable.
Governor Jay Inslee talking about what's happening as the new Delta variant of COVID-19 takes off in Washington, putting pressure on Washington's hospitals, despite a relatively high vaccination rate in the 70% range when compared to many other states.
We will be requiring our state workers and our contractors who come onto our sites and workers in private health care and long-term care settings to be vaccinated as a condition of further employment.
Inslee saying the 60,000 state employees now under his purview will all now have to get the shots, and says in some regions of the state, only half of state workers are vaccinated. Healthcare and long-term care representing another 400,000 workers in the private sector. How many of these categories of workers still remain unvaccinated is not yet clear, but it won't just end with the state. King County and Seattle also joining in.
We will be requiring all 13,500 executive branch employees to be vaccinated by mid-October.
There is already pushback. Republican Senator Mike Patton of Spokane Valley, who says he's not anti-vaccination, writes, they don't deserve to be bullied and threatened into putting something into their body that they don't want. It's not only unnecessary and likely to result in greater rejection of the vaccine, but it's a violation of civil liberties. But what the governor has ordered is expected to be followed by other state agencies he does not control. This afternoon, the insurance commissioner ordered the same for employees in his office. Large agencies like the Department of Natural Resources could also increase vaccine uptake. State Health Secretary Umair Shah.
Unfortunately, we still have far too many of our fellow Washingtonians who have not gotten their vaccine thus far. They are not just unvaccinated, they are unprotected. And they are a big reason why our state is once again seeing a dramatic rise in COVID-19 cases.
So what is not covered by the governor's order today and orders from others? Well, first of all, K through 12 teachers are not covered by this. Institutions of higher learning are not covered by this. And here is a clarification. So what does this mean? Does this mean for those employees affected, they just need to get their second shot by October 18th? No, it's their second shot or the only shot in the case of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine plus 2 weeks. So that you've got to be fully vaccinated with that extra 2 weeks after the second shot by October 18th. So people, they're giving people, they say, extra time to get ready, talk to their doctors, but that's part of the requirement. Live in Capitol Hill in Seattle, Glenn Farley, King 5.
Okay. Jay Inslee tried to outshine President Biden. Actually had a contract for a project in the state of Washington. During this time, we were given the mandate, you will provide only vaccinated construction skilled labor on our jobs, or you can't be there. And we want their vaccine status. Ryan remembers this. For us, because we believe in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and believe that it is only your decision, yours and yours alone. You don't have to justify it to anyone else. That is your First Amendment right. And there's protections under the 14th, firmly held beliefs. We just merely asked our employees, are you vaccinated? And if you are not, just sign that it's a religious exemption or medical, and that's it. We challenged the state. The state came back and said, you have to do this. We fought them contractually. We said, we're not going to do it unless you want to pay us for the time to go and find vaccinated workers, which was very minimal, less than, I think, 16% of the construction force in Washington state. But the bottom line was they attempted to come in and coerce me to turn over the exemptions of my employees so that they could determine whether or not they were legitimate or not. And you saw the social pressures. It's the unvaccinated that are causing the problem and the outbreaks. And yet you have guys like Fauci that get 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 boosters and still contract COVID over and over and over. It was a sham, but it was government at its ugliest, attempting to coerce and control people for what they claim. They claim was right versus wrong. Let's see what they had to say later on, sometime down the road, about the CDC, which was dictating so much of the policies of the Trump administration and other state governors. Let's see what they had to say about this 6-foot social distancing rule.
It's a perfect example of sort of the lack of rigor around how CDC made recommendations. Nobody knows where it came from. Most people assume that the 6 feet of distance, the recommendation for keeping 6 feet apart, comes out of some old studies related to flu, where droplets don't travel more than 6 feet. We now know COVID spreads through aerosols. We've known that for a while, so how operative is that? The initial recommendation that the CDC brought to the White House, and I talk about this, was 10 feet. And a political appointee in the White House said, we can't recommend 10 feet. Nobody can measure 10 feet. It's inoperable. Society will shut down. So the compromise was around 6 feet. Now imagine if that detail had leaked out. Everyone would have said, this is the White House politically interfering with the CDC's judgment. The CDC said 10 feet, it should be 10 feet. But 10 feet was no more right than 6 feet and ultimately became 3 feet. But when it became 3 feet, the basis for the CDC's decision to ultimately revise it from 6 to 3 feet was a study that they had conducted the prior fall. So they changed it in the spring. They had done a study in the fall where they showed that if you have 2 masked individuals, 2 people wearing masks, the risk of transmission is reduced 70% with masks if you're 3 feet apart. So they said on the basis of that, we can now make a judgment that 3 feet is an appropriate distance, which begs the question, if they had that study result in the fall, why didn't they change the advice in the fall? Why did they wait until the spring? And so this is how the whole thing feels arbitrary and not science-based. So we talk about a very careful science-based process, and then these anecdotes get exposed, and that's where Americans start to lose confidence in how the decisions got made.
Fools arbitrarily came up with this 6-foot rule. Then they claimed that it was actually 10 feet. So by their own admission, the 6 feet was, infecting lots of people. You had businesses shut down, out of business, bankrupt, people's lives destroyed over the CDC, who is put over you, the citizen, to tell you what you could or couldn't do, unless you're Gavin Newsom, and then you can go to the French Laundry, or you can be Fauci and go to baseball games. You saw all the hypocrisy going on. But it was government, once again, that was there to protect you. It's for your good. It's for the community's good. We have this one last video, and then we're going to talk about a surprise revelation that was newer to me this week about what government's intention was with the CDC.
The Bank of America records, the story that Bank of America turned over the credit card transactions, whether for an aircraft or a lodging or the purchase of a cup of coffee, for everyone who decided to come to Washington, to be in Washington area, the Northern Virginia area. That's one of the things that you asked questions about. There are victims all over the place. All of the people who suffered when the FBI and the Department of Homeland Security got involved in censorship with social media platforms, millions and millions of tweets and narratives being taken down. That is victimization at scale. It must be resolved. And the fact that those who profess to be most concerned about victimization of people by law enforcement in this country join in the victimization of you. I think that's the takeaway, at least for me, from this hearing. And
So here you have the culmination. You have January 6th. Bank of America decides to, without being coerced, to turn over credit card statements of anybody that was near DC, what they were buying, what they were purchasing, the times. They just gave it. This surveillance state is leading us very quickly to a time where there will be another COVID. There will be another event where they will try the same tactics. Many of you recall that they want you to download an app. Some phones were tracking supposedly how close you were to people that were reported infected. But wait until they put all these ALPRs into position. And when you decide to rebel against staying home, against social distancing, against going to see your loved ones because that is yours and their decision to make a living, to provide for your family, to enjoy your liberty and your freedom of movement. What happens when these ALPRs are used at scale? Hey, we caught John down the street there, 10 o'clock at night, going down the back roads. Where is he going? What's he doing? Well, for his own good, we need to contact him and we need to issue him a notice of behavioral correction and or fines or jail. And then you have the component of when they can control you to the degree that they are, and this is moving our government with this surveillance state, with the technocrats, you'll be like Bank of America. Your data is not secure. We can turn your money on or off anytime we wish. COVID was just a practice run. Technology is not in and of itself a bad thing, but it is how it is used and by whom it is used and for what purpose it is used. And while we say we are celebrating now because we're free, now that Biden is no longer in office, Trump's here, we have nothing to fear. The FBI that you out there hated for the last 4 years when they were going in, it was, as the last congressman was stating, playing with people's comments online, suppressing their free speech to maintain a narrative. What happens when your free speech is no longer that and you are penalized and they decide you're not being a good citizen? You're not going to be able to use your debit card anymore. You're not going to be able to use your debit card to buy alcohol or ammo or camping supplies or red meat. You think it's not going to happen? Apparently you didn't pay attention during COVID as to the extent that these potentates, those that were going to protect all of us against ourselves, and we later learned how much of it was a lie, including that it started at a wet market, that being COVID, back in Wuhan. And you're going to trust that the next administration won't weaponize it against its enemies? You saw them go after Trump. Look at what they did. They bent laws and rules and procedures in order to indict and convict Donald Trump. That same FBI that you couldn't stand is now great. They're golden boys, although nothing has changed. And you can say locally, well, we would never allow the federal government to surveil our people in the great state of Idaho in Kootenai County. We will never let it stand. Let me remind you that Bob Norris, your so-called constitutional sheriff in 2024, without your knowledge, your consent, rolled out 40 patrol vehicles with 3 Motorola ALPRs and the Vigilant software. He was running them for 6 months without your knowledge. No policies on data storage, data security, officer usage. And how many law enforcement agencies around the country don't realize that their cameras, as we have shown video after video and white paper after white paper, they're all vulnerable to being hacked and taken over and used. What happens when you say good old Kootenai County will never succumb to federal tyranny? But the feds have a different idea. And the feds decide that they will use those cameras, and they have the means and the ability and the motivation to use the cameras to get data on people that they want to build their profiles about, good citizens or not.
When we were at John Padfield's conference over the weekend, one of the things he talked about, when you, for those of you that might say, look, Bob Norris had this hardware installed on 40 patrol vehicles. It flew, for lack of a better word, under the radar for most citizens that he went ahead and did that. But Dr. Padfield reminded us that once hardware is installed, you are literally like one software update away from being able to change what that hardware is capable of doing, the kind of data that it's capable of collecting, or who can access it, and those sorts of things. It's one software update away. So I would say step number one was, ask forgiveness later, get this hardware installation done. And we've seen it happening all across the country. So that wasn't to take away from your point or keep you moving forward. But
you're exactly right.
Just an important thing to understand.
Let's bring up slide number 1. We're going to talk just for a few more minutes about what the government attempted to do during COVID. This is brought to us by the Brownstone Institute, which really emerged after all the COVID tyranny. This first page that you're looking at, we're going to throw up a QR code. I want you guys to go to the Brownstone report directly so you can see it for yourself. In the report, there is a link to the Wayback Machine, which is the old internet, the archives. CDC took this report down a couple of years ago, but we found it, or I should say the Brownstone Institute found it. The CDC Coronavirus Disease 2019 Interim Operational Considerations for Implementing the Shielding Approach to Prevent COVID-19 Infections in Humanitarian Settings, and the Interim Operational Considerations for Implementing the Shielding Approach to Prevent COVID-19 Infections in Humanitarian Settings.
Humanitarian.
Thank you. I was having a hard time getting that out.
No problem.
Some good stuff in here. No matter how bad you think COVID policies were, they were intended to be worse. Consider the vaccine passports alone. 6 cities were locked down to include only the vaccinated in public indoor places. There were New York City, Boston, Chicago, New Orleans, Washington, D.C., and Seattle. The plan was to enforce this with a vaccine passport. You and I were there.
I was going to say, that happened to us in Seattle. Do you have your papers?
Yeah.
You may not come in.
It broke. Once the news leaked that the shot didn't stop infection or transmission, the planners lost public support and the scheme collapsed. It was undoubtedly planned to be a permanent and nationwide, if not worldwide. Instead, the scheme had to be dialed back. Folks. Features of the CDC's edict did incredible damage. It imposed the rent moratorium. It decreed the ridiculous 6 feet of distance and mask mandates. It forced plexiglass at the interface for commercial transactions. It implied that mail-in balloting must be the norm, which probably flipped the election. And it delayed the reopening as long as possible. It was sadistic. Even with all that, worse was planned. Here's where it gets interesting, folks. On July 26, 2020, with the George Floyd riots having finally settled down, the CDC issued a plan for establishing nationwide quarantine camps. People were to be isolated, given only food and some cleaning supplies. They would be banned from participating in any religious services. The plan included contingencies for preventing suicide, and there were no provisions made for any legal appeals or even the right to legal counsel. Due process gone. The plan's authors were unnamed, but included 26 footnotes. It was completely official. The document was only removed on about March 26th of 2023. During the entire intervening time, the plan survived on the CDC's public site with little to no public notice or controversy, because what sane person wants to go to the CDC's website?
Mm-hmm.
It was called the Interim Operational Considerations for Implementing the Shielding Approach to Prevent COVID-19 Infections in Humanitarian Settings. See, I got it that time.
Nice work.
Nailed it.
Nice work.
This document presents considerations from the perspective of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for implementing the shielding approach in humanitarian settings as outlined in guidance documents focused on camps, displaced populations, and low-resource settings. This approach has never been documented and has raised questions and concerns among humanitarian partners who support response activities in these settings. The purpose of this document is to highlight potential implementation challenges of the shielding approach from CDC's perspective and guide thinking around implementation in the absence of empirical data. Considerations are based on current evidence known about the transmission and severity of coronavirus disease and may need to be revised as more information becomes available. That was a direct quote from that white paper. By absence of the empirical data, the meaning is nothing like this has ever been tried. The point of the document was to map out how it could be possible and alert authorities to possible pitfalls to be avoided. The meaning of shielding is to reduce the number of severe COVID-19 cases by limiting contact between individuals at higher risk of developing severe disease, high risk, and the general population, low risk. High-risk individuals would be temporarily relocated to safe or green zones established at the household, neighborhood, camp, sector, or community level, depending on the context and settings. They would have minimal contact with family members and other low-risk residents. In other words, this is what used to be concentration camps. Who are these people who would be rounded up? They are older adults and people of any age who have serious underlying medical conditions. Who determines this? Public health authorities. The purpose, the CDC explains, to physically separate high-risk individuals from the general population, and it allows authorities to prioritize the use of the limited available resources. This sounds a lot like condemning people to death in the name of protecting them. We're almost done. The model establishes 3 levels. First is the household level. Here, high-risk people are physically isolated from other household members. That alone is objectionable. Elders need people to take care of them. Duh. They need love and to be surrounded by family. The CDC should never imagine that it would intervene in households to force old people into separate places. The model jumps from households to neighborhood level. Here we have the same approach for separation of those deemed vulnerable. From there, the model jumps again to the camp selector level. Here it is different. A group of shelters such as schools, community buildings within a camp sector with a max 50 high-risk individuals per single green zone, where high-risk individuals are physically isolated together. One point entry is used for exchange of food supplies, and a meeting area is used for residents and visitors to interact while practicing physical distancing, 2 meters, no movement into or outside the green zone. Yes, you read that correctly. The CDC is here proposing concentration camps for the sick or anyone they deem to be in danger of medically significant consequences of infection. Further, to minimize external contact, each green zone should be included able-bodied, high-level risk individuals capable of caring for residents who have disabilities or are less mobile. Otherwise, designate low-risk individuals for these tasks, preferably who have recovered from confirmed COVID-19 and are assumed to be immune. It just keeps going on and on with their plan to protect all of us against our will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you read that, I was reminded, and again, the QR code is up in the corner there, so you for yourself can go take a look at that complete article if you feel like anything was lost in translation, as in terms of what parts of that were pulled from this, what had been posted on the CDC website. And I love how they were talking about lower developed areas that they were really looking out. Again, it's this like where people are in higher need, and they're going to roll that out there.
Yeah.
But I mean, as you were reading that, I was being reminded that during this same time period, my mom was on hospice. And so you read this plan that's in the, back in here somewhere ready to be rolled out, and they could be taking whoever they is. I mean, if it's some kind of mandate that's being issued and then has to be taken to its full extent, they could have ordered somebody like my mom, who was on hospice, and we took care of her at home. That went on for 8 months, to seeing somebody like that removed from your own household. Yeah. I mean, that is the kind of tyranny that you're talking about, but it's being presented as though, these are high risk individuals and we're just going to put you in this place to keep you safe.
But they are the good guys. They're there to control us. How are they going to grab people when people say, screw you, we're not going?
And it's obviously not high risk enough that they talked about you have a healthy individual who can be there to take care of incapacitated persons or adults that need full-time care. So you have to have a healthy person come into these zones or these environments. Again, it's like, okay, I really don't think at this point this is about anybody's concern that this whatever this virus is spreading so wildly that they're going to be doing these kinds of things and creating zones to control it. I mean, it's just.
But how easy will it be when they have the tools at their fingertips?
To your point, yes.
To grab you because they know where you are. They know where you habitually go.
Yeah.
What your patterns of life are.
Well, and this goes back to the beginning, back where you started, when we're talking about the surveillance state or these flock cameras or these ALPRs, this technology, your Ring cameras, and there's others that we've been introduced to. There's some that they are made signal trace. They are made to look familiar to you, so that when you're seeing them mounted on what are already light posts in your area, your eye doesn't even go. It doesn't even go to them, because they do this on purpose, that it looks familiar to you already, like a small satellite dish or that sort of thing. It's only, don't worry about being surveilled if you're not doing anything wrong. But look, we've been through this test run, and now, to further your point, looking at what the CDC...
They lied to us over and over and over again. They arbitrarily made up rules. They destroyed lives. They attempted to stop people's liberty. Some of us said, screw you, we're not going to comply, but we were all affected. We are now in horrible debt, trillions and trillions of dollars. Our supply chains are broken. It goes on and on. But let's remember what some of the founders had to say about things.
Before you remember the founders, because that's going to be good. But again, for those who say you got nothing to worry about, when you're thinking about being put into these kind of zones for whatever the next thing might be, where you're not being compliant, you might think, well, technology is not quite there really to track me.
Yes,
I mean, there's license plate. But again, another thing at John Padfield's conference that we went to over this last weekend, he talked about the face recognition software that is already in place, that's already being used, for example, in your big box stores where you're waiting in line, and they're tracking you by face recognition to know, okay, Dan Wilson's a customer that spends $10,000 a year here in this big box store. This is an example, in this big box store, and I'm not naming names, and he is visibly frustrated waiting in that line. We need to open up a new register and move him over, because they're tracing through facial recognition your emotions and responses. And you might say, well, that's pretty cool. That's cool technology. No, that again should scare you to understand the technology that's already there, with a lot of hardware think about the hardware that's already installed around Kootenai County and who's brought it in here. That's one software update away from doing these sorts of technologies. Yeah. So now forward to your founders.
Patrick Henry, love Patrick Henry, stated this while he was giving his speech for the ratifying of the federal Constitution in 1788. Suspicion is a virtue as long as its object is the public good, and as long as it stays within proper bounds. Guard with jealous attention to the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. And I happen to be one of those individuals. I know many of you are as well. He goes on to say, show me that age and country where the rights and liberties of the people were placed on the sole chance of their rulers being good men without a consequent loss of liberty. You can't believe that men are going to be good. I know that's a fairy tale. We generally believe that people are good. We have good interactions, but in the hearts of men, human tradition, the behaviors, the human condition rather, will always evolve or devolve rather to tyranny and to attempt to take things from others that don't belong to you. And in this case, those that rule us. And let's face it, a lot of our leaders today, they don't act like representatives. They act like they are nobility, like they are kings, like they are our rulers. You have to continually look at your liberty through the lens of no one truly is looking out for your good. The next slide is going to tie all of this in together. You've heard me talk about it. Actually, let's go back to Thomas Paine. Thank you. Thomas Paine had this to say: an avidity to punish is always dangerous to liberty. It leads men to stretch, to misinterpret, and to misapply even the best of laws. Yes, again, how many wanted to throw people into jail because they weren't wearing masks? We all have our stories of not wearing masks, walking into stores and having other beta males and females that wanted to try to confront us. And they were all empowered because, after all, the government says to wear a mask. You and I have many stories on this. I won't get into them. Paine goes on to say, he that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself. What does that mean? Republican versus Democrat. You can't assume that we're going to handle this power because we're the good guys and we will never abuse it. We've seen the abuses take place on both sides plenty and often as of late, with the pendulum swinging wider and wider. And then lastly, parchment barriers. You've heard me talk about this before. The United States Constitution and the Bill of Rights is nothing more than a piece of paper. It can be torn up. It can be tossed aside. It's meaningless. The words are only powerful if men will uphold and defend the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And once upon a time, we were a nation that did that. Today, not so much. Now, for those of you who are beside yourself that we would allow a Democrat onto this program to have a conversation, you're part of the problem. You're part of this entire argument, which you're caught in, which is a lie, which says, if you do not believe as I do, you are my enemy and I can have nothing to do with you. That's infantile. It's complete stupidity. And in fact, I find it very ironic that one of the loudmouths, who every day I'm more and more convinced by their behavior, is really being paid by the Southern Poverty Law Center and is also a confidential human source, as I've been told by law enforcement. But this individual that likes to stir up crap wherever he goes ran as a Democrat in this very state.
No, you're showing your true colors. Yeah. You are. Dan Wilson is.
Yeah. Anything to get attention is what that dude does.
Go get him, Tiger.
All right, let's bring on our next guest, pre-recorded. I think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation. It may not go as exactly as way you think it did, but you're going to have to be the judge of that.
One of the things we've always tried to do on this program is give people the opportunity to hear directly from the individuals who want to represent them. It's not filtered through campaign ads, headlines, or these 30-second sound bites, because where has that gotten us? Tonight, we're joined by Kaylee Peterson, who's running for Congress in Idaho's 1st Congressional District against incumbent Congressman Russ Fulcher. You're going to learn some really interesting things about Mr. Fulcher. Whether you've already made up your mind or you're still deciding, our goal is pretty simple. Ask thoughtful questions, give our guest the opportunity to explain her positions in her own words, and encourage you to draw your own conclusions. As always, we don't endorse candidates. That is not what's happening here. We're having a conversation because we believe informed voters make better decisions, and that starts with hearing directly from the people who are asking for your vote. And with that, Kaylee, thanks for joining us.
Joining us. You are running for Congress. Tell us about what that's all about, where you're coming from, and why you're running.
I never thought I would run for office, to be honest. I mean, growing up, you look at all of the politicians that you see are independently wealthy, Ivy League educated, and I'm a rural working class mom up in the Eagle Foothills. It started because I really love doing the work behind the scenes. So most of my life, I volunteered, organizing, community organizing, trying to solve problems. And then in 2022, I saw a Facebook post that they couldn't find anyone who was willing to run in the 1st Congressional District, especially as a Democrat here in Idaho. And so I raised my hand and I said I'd put my name on the ballot. And then I got to know the district. And I realized that so much of what was happening was just miscommunication, definitions, party politics, and what the political landscape has been over the last 30 years. I love the work. I love the communities that I met. And I think bridging the gap with just common sense policy has been successful. But I knew it wasn't going to happen in 1 or 2 cycles. I knew it was going to take commitment. So this is my 3rd time now running after building infrastructure across rural Idaho for the last 4 years. And this is the year that I think we have the momentum to do something really special.
6 generations flow through your blood. Tell me about your family, how they came to Idaho, and a little bit about your background there.
So my background's a little unconventional. My mom's side, I'm 6th generation Idahoan. So they were Dutch farmers who came to the U.S., went through Illinois, and then landed in Idaho. They homesteaded in the North Eagle Foothills. My entire family lives within a mile of me, and I live on a street that's named after my great-grandfather. And I wish I would have known how special that was when I was younger. But now that I have a 14-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son, and my husband Trevor and I have been together 17 years, and we have this amazing place next to family, I'm really connected to what made Idaho so special. And I think what draws a lot of people here, which is how close our communities are, the kind of freedom that we have here, and how our community kind of takes care of itself, how safe and beautiful it is. But then on the other side, my dad's side is from Connecticut. So my childhood, I actually flew back and forth between Eagle, Idaho and Groton, Connecticut. My dad was a Marine, went into the Army National Guard. So I was raised around the Groton sub base. And so, yeah, I had this really unique perspective and experience growing up where I got to see a lot of different kind of worlds. And I've been in Idaho now. I haven't been back to Connecticut in probably 17 years. But watching Idaho shift over the last 10 years, not in how special our communities are, but our dialogue and how we judge one another and how we talk to one another. That's what I think I wanted to bring back to the campaign, is just getting neighbors to see each other for who they are, and maybe hold the government accountable, because that's another favorite of Idaho communities that I grew up in.
What do you think has changed when you are talking about the last 10 years? What specifically, in your opinion, has changed?
I think we don't judge politicians by what they do and how they show up in community. I think it's gotten far more mainstream media, social media, sound bites. I don't think politicians are really doing anything. I think they take a lot of money from corporate PACs and think tanks that tell them what to say to rile people up. And it's just led to us kind of being turned against one another. I have communities where a Republican and a Democrat living next door blame each other for the problems that I think are caused back in Washington, D.C. And these definitions and labels and throwing words around, while the politicians who are responsible for this work, who should be offering actual policy solutions, kind of get away scot-free. There was a statistic that blew my mind. It was about 6 or 7 years ago, I believe. Congress had a 16% approval rating, and yet 94% of incumbents were reelected. So there's a disconnect between what's happening back in government and what communities understand of the political process. And I want to try and bring that back and get it grounded again.
Quite the dichotomy, isn't it?
Yes.
That we have everybody's congressman is a crook except for mine. And if you are a incumbent, you're most likely going to get reelected no matter who challenges you. At least that's the way it seems in today's big dollar campaigns.
Oh, absolutely. And it's been the strangest experience. I don't think I could put it into words. Going from being someone who's never been in the public eye, who was a behind the scenes normal working class mom, to immediately being perceived as a congressional candidate online, and how that changes and how the public perceives you, especially having the Democrat label behind my name. And I don't think I fully understood the assumptions people make about what that means. And it's funny because I have the Democrat label next to my name, but the DNC won't even take a phone call. The DNC has not spent one penny or 1 minute in this district in nearly 30 years. And so even though I'm running as a Democrat, for me, I get to define what that means. I get to define what the party should be. I get to define those policies. And my hope is that I can go in here and show people that it really is the candidate, the policy, and who they take money from, who they're listening to, that really matters. I've met Republicans that would give you the shirt off their back, are the most principled, decent men I have ever met that want to do good. And I've met Democrats that are con men. I've also seen the opposite. And so I'm really just here with the Democrat label, trying to build some trust in rural communities again, get the focus on the right issues, showing people how to look at candidates differently, showing how we can offer real legislation, real policy solutions in DC day one. It's frustrating as a working class mom running for office, watching people back in DC. Idaho's congressional delegation, they are close to this administration, this president. They have some of the most prestigious committee assignments back in Congress. They have the power, the authority, and the privilege to do real good. Economic reform for the middle class and small businesses, responsible federal land management. They have the opportunity to do this. And they don't, not even after a decade of service. So yeah, I'm excited. My hope is that just because I'm a Democrat doesn't mean that I don't plan to hold Democrats accountable too. The joke is that when I get back to Congress, I want to swing a hammer of justice around both sides of the aisle. I want to clean up both sides. Because I'm a Democrat doesn't mean that I won't hold every corrupt Democrat accountable, just the same as I plan to do for Republicans.
Now, we're going to talk in just a few minutes about your role as a Democrat versus independent versus Republican and how you got there. But you said something that was very interesting to me, not surprising, that you cannot even get the DNC, if I heard you correctly, to pick up a phone and talk with you. It kind of reminds you of what happened in, 2016 with Bernie and Hillary and DNC running over top of, supposedly the party of the people, and yet the popularity of Bernie was scaring them, and they cut him loose. And then what happened with Seth Rich. So when it comes to national politics, I know that you are optimistic that you can go in there and make a change. Having watched politics now for 30, almost 40 years myself, I tend to believe that Congress is a lost cause. I mean, as you were talking about our Idaho delegation, look at our senators, Simpson and Risch, Risch and Crapo, old fossils that have been there for an eternity. They have absolutely no wherewithal to say, maybe it's time that I leave these positions and hand it off to a younger generation. We're seeing Congress get exponentially old and unfit and unable to do their job. Why do you think that you can go in and make a change knowing how messed up Congress is, and RNC, DNC, and all the above?
This is the most important question that you can ask, because I know when I'm saying these things, especially with my role and who I am, it can sound like I'm naive or idealistic, but I'm not, right? This work on the ground 24/7 for 5 years in some of the most conservative rural areas. I've seen corrupt politics firsthand. I've experienced it. But what I've also experienced is that I am not alone in Idaho's 1st congressional district with a want for change. And I think what I've learned that is most important in today's political landscape is how you build coalition. I've built coalition across the state with Republicans and independents and Democrats and libertarians and constitutionalists and people who had just sworn off politics, all in all. But more importantly, built coalition nationwide. And I'm very, very picky about who I work with. I only work with working grassroots candidates that swear off the same money I do. I only work with candidates who are committed to the exact same government accountability platform. And I work right now with a specific coalition, Take Back Congress. That's over 111 candidates that have all sworn day one of office that we will introduce legislation that bans congressional stock trades, a moratorium on lobbying for members of Congress, an ethics panel for federal justices, all term limits, all of these really incredibly important pieces of legislation that would return some semblance of power back to voters and the people. And we're not alone, right? The vast majority of America wants this. It's just that the vast majority of America is only hearing this really vocal minority that are talking against this, that are hyper partisan, that are divisive, that aren't really solving any of these problems. And I think once America realizes how many of us are in the same boat and how many candidates they are just behind the scenes, because grassroots candidates aren't the one that make national media. Unless you make $1 to $5 million, you're not going to make the news, right? So it's harder to see us. It's harder to know that we're running. But the momentum is behind our side. I think that there are hundreds of us across the country doing this work and building coalition together. So I do think it's possible. I don't think Congress is a lost cause. I just think it takes a lot longer to make the difference that we want to make when you're not taking corporate PAC money or APAC money or super PAC money. But there are people doing the work. And I think with that coalition, we can bring the change. And I think the pendulum can swing back towards justice for the American people.
So you think that it's possible to overcome the uniparty? And do you even believe in the uniparty, or what's your view on that term?
I'm not familiar with the term uniparty. Is it basically just that corporate lobbyists kind of own both parties?
Well, I think it is that they claim to be against each other, but in reality, they are voting as one block for they themselves and those that they enrich, not the people.
Yeah, 100%. I understand. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I think that we're learning new strategies and methods that overcome what their advantage was. Their advantage was that they media narrative and the algorithm, and that they had the money to buy influence. But what they don't have is presence in the community. They don't of the community. And there are enough of us doing the actual work on the ground, building trust, building coalition, gaining trust and a reputation, supersedes what people are hearing on social media, that I think it is possible. I mean, it worries my husband. I'm lie that we're going up against probably the wealthiest and most corrupt influences. But like I said, we are the majority, and it might take there, and it's not going to be an easy fight. Nobody claims it is. But all of America is sick and tired of this. All of us are waking up to the reality of who the government is actually working for, and corporate influence in our politics. And I think people are looking for a difference. And there are candidates out there that are doing the work and showing people that they're willing to show up differently.
How did we get to where we are now with this system that is obviously favors those that can raise a lot of money, those that are part of the in crowd, not the grassroots, as you've been talking about for the past few minutes? How did we get to this place in time in our history? Our founders did not originally intend on there being political parties. How do we get here?
It's a really long, convoluted history. I think what we've learned in the last 15 years, more than anything or any time before that, is we all expected that when politicians or people in government broke the rules or broke the law or lied under oath, that there were consequences, that you were forced out of office, that you wouldn't be able to hold office again. And I think in the last 15, 20 years, especially, we've learned that is not the case. The vast majority of politicians who have stepped down or resigned did so because they were ashamed and did so themselves. But there is no way to actually enforce the rules for those that are in the most powerful positions in government. We've watched it for 20 years. Politicians get away with absolutely everything, and there are no consequences. And then you tie that into absolutely unlimited campaign financing for corporations. Just in 2022, corporations spent over $4 billion lobbying Congress. I want you to, if you're in a boardroom, if you're a shareholder, how much money do you have to save because of legislation that Congress passes to be okay spending $4 billion lobbying Congress? And that's just one industry. That's not even accounting for all of the different influences right now that lobby Congress. When Medicare Part D was being argued on the congressional floor, there were 420 to 430 members of Congress present and over 600 lobbyists. And I think when you allow unrestricted, unfettered access, then of course those with the most money are going to beat out the rural blue collar working class guy in Orfino or Reagan's or Bonner's Ferry, who's working 70 hours trying to take care of his family and doesn't have the money or time to get Congress to listen to him the same way. And then you add Citizens United, which give corporations free speech status. So corporations have none of the liability that we have as individuals, but apparently all of the same constitutional rights and abilities to influence Congress. And I think that's where we've really seen it go from, normal kind of corruption with people in power that you're going to see in every circumstance to how that slippery slope got us into the kind of what I would consider pit of corruption that we're dealing with today.
Do you believe in the term the administrative state, which would imply that beyond the three branches of government, that the fourth branch, the administrative state rather, those that make the regulations and don't have to go to Congress for funding or permission or to the executive. Do you think that there is a deep state, I guess is what some call it, or an administrative government, and what's your view on how we control that if there indeed is one?
I think there are a few issues, right? I think that there are a couple things that we're seeing. You definitely see where political appointments and people who have a conflict of interest are sat in these administrative seats. Absolutely do whatever they want. And that's a huge issue. One, the fact that we have anybody in government with a conflict of interest to private corporations, private wealth, or private interests is a huge issue. But I think that there's even a bigger issue here, which is just redundancy, understaffing, bureaucracy, a lack of efficiency, a lack of experience and knowledge in very specific areas that creates backlog and issues. So I think communities deal with kind of both of these issues and see it all as one. where I think that there's kind of a corruption aspect, and then also just government not caring enough and also not listening to stakeholders. I think that's something that we're missing, especially here in Idaho, where we have 63% federal land management, and the relationship between local stakeholders and the federal government is so important. We don't have politicians and congressmen who are present in these communities listening to local stakeholders and their relationship with the USDA, with the DEQ, with all of these different administrative kind of branches that are actually trying to solve problems or cut down on redundancy or make things easier for communities. And that can feel like the administrative state. And then you have corruption on top of that, and everything just gets harder for local communities who are just trying to manage their business or their land or their ranch or their family.
Let's step back a little bit. 6 generations. You have lived on the East Coast, Connecticut, and correct? I got that right?
Yeah.
Connecticut? Okay. Connecticut,
yeah.
And Idaho in the greater Boise area. So 6 generations, you guys have deep roots here. Tell me, how is it that you came to identify as a Democrat? We don't hear that a lot. When I was a kid growing up just over in Spokane, 20 miles to the west, I remember Kootenai County, Bonners and Boundary being predominantly blue dog Democrat areas because it was working men. It was loggers and miners and ranchers and agriculture. And so when did you become a Democrat? Was it something in your family and you just grew up that way, or did you make a decision to become one?
No, not at all, actually. None of my family really knows where I came from. It's a running joke because my Idaho family, 6 generations of really old school Republican Idaho farmers. I mean, Reagan Republicans. My dad, he was a huge fan of Trump. I think my dad was a little bit more of an anarchist and liked the idea that Trump was going to burn down the system a little bit. I think that was more his. He was a Marine for sure. Like he joined.
And real quick, I want to interject. Some people that watch may not even understand. They think of the typical term anarchist as Antifa and those BLM guys that are out in the middle of the streets throwing Molotov cocktails and other things. But anarchists are those that really believe that every man should more or less be able to kind of govern himself, correct?
Yeah.
So that's
the
what
way
your dad
my
was.
dad looked at it, yeah, he thought the government was too corrupt to ever fix. And I think he thought Trump was angry and radical and that he would probably bring the system down. That's kind of more he liked the idea of living in the backwoods with his 4x4 and his guns and just being able to do what he wanted. That was kind of my dad. My mom wasn't very political at all. But I actually got really politically involved at a very young age. So I remember, I think I was 8 years old in 1998, writing the Clinton administration criticizing how they were handling Kosovo. Like at 11 and 12, when I was homesick from school, I would call into News Talk Radio and give my 11-year-old perspective on local policy.
That's awesome.
I am truly a government nerd. Like I love this country's history. What I'm really grateful, the only thing Connecticut really gave me, other than a deep love of pizza, is I grew up right next to a Revolutionary era battlefield, the Fort Griswold battlefield. And my library was a 250-year-old library with a museum upstairs of local curiosities. And Benedict Arnold grew up in Groton, Connecticut. And so you hear all of these stories about the founding fathers and what it took, and the ideologies and the philosophies and the ideals of these young men who built this great democratic experiment. And I think that always really appealed to me. And I love the government and the history and the policy of it. I don't think I was ever a really hardcore Democrat. I think it started in 2008. I started volunteering and working for local campaigns. There were some fantastic Ada County commissioner candidates that had some phenomenal ideas on substance abuse treatment and local ordinances that I really liked. And they were both Democrats. And so I worked for their campaigns. But for me, I look in Idaho and I look at the policy I want. I want to cut regulations on Idaho business, Idaho farmers. I want to cut tax rates on middle-class families in the state. I want to make sure that we close loopholes for billionaires and one percenters and corporations that use Idaho's labor and resources. I want to make sure that we maintain public use of public lands while responsibly managing energy interests on these lands. And for me, that wasn't something I could do under the Idaho GOP. And that wasn't something that Russ Fulcher represented. And also in Idaho, as a Democrat, I don't have to answer to anybody in the establishment, right? I get to be my own kind of candidate. And if I wanted to go, I could have. And a lot of people have told me that. Why didn't you just run as a Republican? You were an unknown. Nobody would have known any better. You could have just run and primaried Russ Fulcher and not done any of this. But I don't respect the way that this Idaho GOP is run in Idaho's 1st congressional district. There is a lot of money being funneled into Idaho politics on the right. There is a lot of influence there. There are a lot of think tanks, a lot of different, whereas on the left, as a Democrat in Idaho, the only Democrats I'm working with are rural Democrats that live out in Kamei or Bonners Ferry or Kootenai County, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. If you put a Republican and a Democrat from standpoint next to each other, they're all Idahoans. And so that's, I think, where the decision came down for me to run as a Democrat. And my hope is I can bring that Blue Dog Democrat title back. I love working with Idaho trades. I work with almost every union in the state. Our carpenters, our steel workers, our electricians, our firefighters, our commercial food workers. I'm working on our loggers and our miners so that they know I'm not going to take their jobs. I actually want to make sure we maintain these industries for a long time coming. And my hope is I can bring that definition back to the party. And maybe we can expand some of those definitions, get some new people in there, undo some of the influence of two-party politics, and expand that system a little bit so we don't keep running into the same issue that we have over the last really 4 decades.
Idaho is a right-to-work state. I heard you mention that you work a lot with labor unions and quite a few of them. So give me a little bit more of a background, what you mean by you work with them and you meet with them, and just overall your stance on unions. And it sounds like you support them, and why you are supportive of unions in a right to work state.
I think the biggest concern or critique that I hear of unions is that they protect bad employees, or that there's corruption, or that there's these issues within unions. But the truth is, you're going to find that wherever human beings are involved, right? And in today's system in Idaho, the much bigger issue is corporate influence, right? You have monopolies, you have these giant corporations, wages are stagnated, you have a lot of abuses of Idaho labor. Wages are down, health benefits are scarce, pensions are rough, retirement is rough, you can be laid off for any reason. Employees just don't have the power or balance with kind of the corporations that often employ a lot of Idaho workers. So for me, I really enjoyed working with Idaho unions, one, because they often understand these issues best. Like, I work with a lot of our guys down at the paper mill in Lewiston, right? And they understand what the mill needs to be successful, but they also understand what the people in Lewiston need to be successful. And that perspective is really valuable to me, because it's not some CEO that's just trying to convince shareholders that the company's doing good. These are people that want to make sure their jobs are safe for decades on end. And I think the data shows nationwide that members of unions earn up to 32% more in wages than non-union jobs, that their healthcare and benefits are cheaper and more comprehensive than non-union jobs, that their pensions are bigger than non-union jobs, and union membership is down across the country. And I think in order to try and bring some balance back to this system that we have, I want to make sure that our unions are strong so that employees have somebody to back them up when an employer is doing wrong. And especially in Idaho, in a right to work state, You don't have union corruption, right? There is no big Idaho labor that I'm dealing with. These are local electricians and plumbers and firefighters and members of our community that just understand labor issues and want to protect their coworkers and members of their community. So I really, really enjoy working with them, and I really value what they bring, especially in today's America, right? And the issues that we face.
So it kind of appears in that it's the big dogs that are squashing the smaller dogs, hence why the support for the unions to make sure that those that don't have the resources can compete against those that have a lot of resource. And I guess when I'm looking at that, is that a correct statement?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely it. There is no Idaho worker that I know of that has the money or the legal defense to go up against a giant corporation that has giant legal teams, right? And while there may be corruption everywhere, I far more trust Idaho workers and Idahoans to come to the defense of their coworkers and members of their community than I would trust a corporate shareholder or a board of directors or a CEO to make the right decisions. So it's just, once again, trying to bring some balance back and give Idahoans representation and the advocacy that I think that they deserve.
From a Congress standpoint, what would that look like for supporting the unions back here in Idaho?
From a congressional standpoint, I look at the unions as one of the best stakeholders. They understand these issues. So when I want to understand the dams, or when I want to understand logging, or when I want to understand what's happening at the local community level, I go to the unions and I listen. I go to their local meetings, I reach out to their leadership and I say, hey, what are you guys seeing? What are you experiencing? What do you think, this business needs to be successful? How is federal policy? They are just a fantastic partner in order to understand what's happening locally, and also to understand, how middle-class families are doing. Like, what are you making? What are you needing? How is the cost of living doing in your community? So for me, it's just a really important perspective to bring back when I look at federal policy and how federal policy intersects with Idaho's 1st congressional district.
I grew up in a union family. My dad was a steel worker for his entire career. He was a union president for 20 years. It's safe to say I've been around unions quite a bit. I was a local 98 carpenter for my apprenticeship back before you were born. I'll point out, since this was the early 90s. But I've run a commercial construction company for almost 30 years now. And while I know a lot of the benefits for working in trade, I think I would disagree on some of the aspects that the unions protect. They can do that, but some of the drawbacks as an employer, who we pay our employees at an above scale because we need good workers and we believe it's our moral obligation. At the same time, we're an independent contractor that many times in the state of Washington, where I do a lot of my work, we don't have the same advantages that the big union contractors do, because they get the federal power through the grants and through the special backroom deals to do the very large projects. So I'm not really convinced that, unions are the end all, and especially when it comes to public unions. Private unions, if you want to be part of a private union all day long, I'm for that. I believe that is your right. Nobody's forcing you to do that. But man, having been a reserve officer for 12 years, working in the state of Washington, where, my exposure to a lot of unions was over there, I can tell you that the public sector unions, law enforcement, fire, government in general, I got to be quite honest. I think they're some of the most spoiled, rotten people in the world, because they make a lot of money when it comes to the overall benefits package that we, the taxpayers, pay for. And it's really not easy to compete against trying to draw from a labor pool where people can say, well, we can go work for the federal government. They're not actually making the money. They're just taxing the people. So how do you square that with the idea that those that are part of unions are just those that need to be protected.
I understand the concern, right? But I think for me, the way that I look at this issue is I feel like because our system is so imbalanced right now, that we have a lot of smaller business, independent business, and workers coming at each other, kind of fighting for scraps because our budget is so thin. And it's so funny because often I talk about federally funding public education or federally funding federal land management, the number one question I get is, how are we supposed to pay for this? And there's an assumption that Democrat like me is going to is. But one of my biggest frustrations in today's system, especially with Doge, right? I had high hopes with Doge because actually one of the first things I wanted to do was a full audit of every federal penny spent, what programs were spent, where that was going. But then I watched Doge go after Social Security and Medicaid and these local programs. For instance, I don't know how many Americans understand that we as taxpayers $36 billion annually in direct subsidies just to the fossil fuel industry. But if you include indirect subsidies, that's tax cuts, that number jumps between $760 and $800 billion annually. And that's just one industry. That's one. A lot of the corporations, there's an investigation into $80 billion of annual Medicaid fraud just by United Healthcare. So I feel like the federal government is funneling so much of our federal tax dollars to the very top that there isn't really competition in our free markets. Small independent contractors struggle to survive while corporations are taking corporate handouts and federal tax and growth and subsidies and all of these different things. And we know this for a fact, because if you look at the last 45 years, and you look at where the money lies in our economy, more than $56 to $75 trillion has gone from working class kind of economies, local economies, to just the top 1%. So when I look at worrying about how much teachers are making or law enforcement is making, and I look at independent contractors, first, there's an issue of corruption, and 100%, I want to root out corruption at every level. I want to root out corruption in unions. I want to root out corruption in government. I'm not saying that that doesn't exist. And I do want to create new oversight and enforcement mechanisms to make sure that that doesn't happen and backroom deals aren't stealing opportunities away from better deserving people. But I think that there's a much larger issue at play where you have small business and contractors that are fighting over these contracts because there isn't enough space left in our free markets for them to really profit and succeed in the way that they would if we didn't monopolize corporate industries leeching federal tax dollars and contracts away from local economies and local businesses. So I think, once again, I know it's a really convoluted answer, and I think that there's a lot of different aspects to it that are important to look at. And not every business should be union, right? Like, not every employer needs a union. I'm not one that says that, especially with the really big employers where employees wouldn't have a voice against, corporate shareholder or corporate leader. Think that they're important.
Yeah, and I think part of my argument why I got out back in the late 90s is due to the fact that I'm worth more than the guy that's working next to me. We were getting the exact same wage. In fact, it's funny how these things circle around. 30 years ago, there was this carpenter I worked with, same company, just a real knucklehead to deal with, couldn't stand him. We were union. He continued his life union. Just this last week, he applied for a position to work with us. The way these things go in full circle. But I was 10 times worth he was, in my opinion. And I eventually started my own company because I did not like the fact that the guys that did not have the same skill set, the same work ethics and motivation were given the exact same dollar amount that I was busting my hump. So I think, this is kind of one of those things where, in all respect to my dad, who did fight for the men that worked in the mills, I've seen his philosophy. His philosophy was one where we don't take advantage of the company. We honor our contract, but we also take care of our guys. Again, in private industry, I don't care. But what I do care when it's public funds that touch the unions unfairly, that give them the higher advantage, as well as the public unions. You will never convince me that the public sector should be unionized, because I have seen it up close and personal. I've got contracts with the federal government. I have seen the amount of fraud and waste that is employed by these unionized, by the collective bargaining of the government unions. So I don't know. I think that that's one that I would challenge you personally to dig a little deeper into your philosophy of saying, is it really right that the taxpayers have to continually deal? If you truly believe in Doge, which I believe you, then it has to come across every sector of the government when it includes employee packages as well.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I do worry though, because I look at the VA employees, right? Like, for instance, my personal experience around 3.5 years ago, I lost my father in a VA hospital in Lexington, Kentucky. I saw firsthand how undermanned and underfunded these VA hospitals were. And I watched these employees every ounce of themselves to take care of my father in his final moments, and then how they took care of me afterwards in handling the probate and the mess. And I'm alone in Kentucky dealing with all of this. I work with our VA employees here in Boise, and I see how much they give of themselves versus what their income is. I look at Idaho
hold on. I got to stop you though. I got to stop you, okay? Because that's all well and fine. But what about the rest of the world that equally, the waitress that puts her time in very, long hour and is struggling? I mean, that's kind of the human condition. So why do we separate out and go, well, yeah, I'm glad. And by the way, I got a good friend that's dying right now because of the mismanagement of the VA. I get that. It's deplorable what we have done to our veterans with the lack of care, while we've funded other countries that apparently are more of a priority. But with all due respect, why does one person in one business, one company, one trade, why does it matter that they work any harder or less than somebody else? That's the way the world is.
But here's where I believe the purpose of unions becomes really important. Everybody's had bad experiences, right? There are always going to be idiots we have to deal with in life. We've all met them. We've all worked with the idiot that doesn't deserve his paycheck. We've all watched the absolute Nepo baby get the job he didn't deserve. That's the human condition. And our hope is that we can as much as humanly possible and stop that from happening. But where I see labor unions' purpose is that when you have somebody that is being paid less than their worth, when they are a single and against a giant corporate interest or a giant business or the federal government, that employees have the ability to come together, appreciate and lift up employees. And while that may go wrong and there may be contracts that aren't deserved, I would their employees have this option available to them. If there's a waitress that is being overworked and underpaid and belittled and put in dangerous situations and made to, then I would hope that there were other employees in that restaurant and that they could band together to demand fairness and the right wages. And so that's where I see that purpose being, that this is a thing where every man actually can lift each other up and give each other the voice that they wouldn't have by themselves against businesses. And does it go wrong? Absolutely. But when I look at the big picture in the United States of America right now, what I see are the everyman, middle class America working longer than ever for less money than ever, struggling more than ever. Cars are more expensive, childcare is more expensive, groceries are more expensive, gas is more expensive. You've got businesses and Idaho farmers that are paying high tax rates, dealing with the most regulations, dealing with all of these burdens. And then you have the people that are paying off Congress who don't have these regulatory burdens, that don't have the same taxes. And for me, unions are one piece of the puzzle that we have to try and fight for fairness. And yeah, so I definitely see where you're coming from. And I don't know if we're going to get eye to eye on the issue.
No,
but
in fact,
I
I've
respect where you're
taken up
coming
more.
from, and I want to fix it.
I've taken up a lot of your time on that one topic. I didn't mean to, but it was an interesting. I don't get to often talk with somebody that is on the pro-union side to bounce these ideas back and forth. Like I said, I have tremendous respect. My living accommodations as a kid was because of my dad's ability to be a steel worker. But when it comes to the public, as I've already said, we differ. Now, moving past that, because I bogged us down by prolonging a lot of questions, harder questions with you on that. What else makes you, in your estimate, a Democrat? We've heard a lot of things that you're saying that sound very similar to Republicans and independents, but you've chosen to be a Democrat. What else makes you a Democrat that differs from Republicans?
See, here's the hardest part of today's political landscape, because if I just tell an Idahoan what my policy stances are, the number one response I get is, you sound like a Republican. What do you mean you want to cut taxes on Idaho business, and you want to cut regulatory burdens on entrepreneurs, and you want to... But that's where I think the biggest problem in elections and in our politics today is we use different words and have different definitions for these labels, right? So when I talk to somebody and they hear Democrat, the first thing that usually they come back is, so you're a communist, you're a socialist, you're going to take my guns, you're going to raise my taxes, and that's how they define it. But that is in no world any way in which I would define what being a Democrat means, right?
Sure.
To me, being a Democrat means making sure that we're responsibly managing federal lands. And that means we're generating enough revenue from private leases or creative recreational passes. That doesn't mean just environmentalism. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'm not going to touch anyone's guns, especially the daughter of a Marine, somebody from Idaho. So yeah, it's we get bogged down in, why do you call yourself a Democrat? But for me, it was, where does my position in this state fit? And there's a running joke in my friends and family that I was bioengineered in a lab specifically for this congressional race, because I love being able to take the hostile conversations that I get from maybe Republicans or conservatives that think they hate a Democrat, and being able to bring that back down and find some common ground. And I don't know anybody else that would be willing to commit their life for 6 years without making a penny, and be willing to, be called an enemy of this state,
Sure.
and the death threats and all of the things that happen.
Sure.
But I know that this is where I can do the most good. I know that I'm willing to have the conversations. I'm willing to put in the work. I'm willing to sacrifice the paycheck. I'm willing not to take any of the money. I'm willing to bring the fight to the top, because I'm not scared of these people. There's nothing that they can do that would be worse than things I've experienced in my life. Like, I'm tough enough to deal with it.
Sure.
And so for me, why am I a Democrat? I think it's because I have a unique opportunity to take the label Democrat and try and get communities focused on policy again, and focused on how we relate to candidates and what we look for from candidates and how we judge candidates. And I get to hold who I believe is a super corrupt politician accountable while I do it. So yeah, I think that's really the main driving factor behind the choice, and the independence that lends me. I don't have to see. The establishment ignores me, and I much rather work with Idaho communities. So I love the job.
Yeah, of course, I ran for sheriff in the end of 2023, as you probably already know. And then shortly before the primary, after having experienced Idaho Republicans, especially in North Idaho, Brent Reagan, to name just, I guess, probably one of the worst culprits, and his mafia organization, including Terry Seymour, who sits on his executive committee, or did at one point, was a PC, and works for Russ Fulcher in his office. I know what you're talking about when your own people come to attack you. And rather than listening to the the words of who you are as a person, how you're going to govern, what is your philosophy. I agree with you. I'm done with the labels. They are still stuck in my vocabulary because I've been using them for more years than I have not. I tend to look at what is somebody's stance above all else to the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. And then everything else you can kind of, thrash out a little bit, but really what is your philosophy? And so I do admire you for taking on somebody like Fulcher and saying, I don't agree with your policies. I don't agree with the way you are governing this country. And I am actually going to put myself out there with my ideas, attempting to get others to listen to my, because first of all, they have to listen. If they don't listen to you and they just label you, that far too often happens. But I'm going to win people over in the marketplace of ideas by who I am, what I have to say. And I'm with you. I think there are some really good Democrats. Here, use that as a sound bite, you knuckleheads. There are good Democrats. There are also extremely horrible, corrupt Republicans. I've witnessed this myself in the first person. But let's talk about Mr. Fulcher, because that is who you are running against, Russ Fulcher. What was it that he was doing that caused you to say, I need to challenge this guy? Tell us a little more about that battle and why you chose to run against him.
Well, it's interesting because what I understood of Russ Fulcher was really only a drop in the bucket to what I have come to understand over the last 5 years. To me, what I looked at was a politician who was never actually in Idaho, who was saying one thing and then doing another, who was talking about the deficit and talking about budget issues, and then voting against things like Social Security and land management and VA employee, but then at the very same time passing legislation that increased our deficit when it came to corporate tax cuts. And that's what I get most frustrated about, right? There's this huge focus on really essential services across rural Idaho, rural healthcare. There's a recent $100 billion cut to rural healthcare services. The big, beautiful bill, which I think was $63 billion in annual tax cuts that are made permanent to those making the most money in this country, while working class families got scraps off of a bank. I like to say it's like scraps off a banquet table, because the average working class family got between $162 and $1,000 kind of tax break each year, even though the cost of living has gone up even more than that. It was saying one thing and doing another, and then voting against the very people. And then if you look at his FEC records, it becomes very, very clear why he makes the decisions he makes. He's getting money from Blue Cross Blue Shield and HMOs and health insurance companies. He's getting money from giant think tanks like the Heritage Foundation. He's super supported by the Right to Work Committee, which, whether you support Right to Work or not, the Right to Work Committee is funded by Koch brothers and the Walton family and some of the biggest billionaire elites. He's getting money from Jim Jordan's PAC. He's getting money from logging and then making really irresponsible decisions when it comes to land management. Just recently, Simpson and a few other of our congressional delegates voted in favor of the Public Lands and Cans bill. And that bill wasn't perfect. It still allowed for the sale of 300-acre lots in federal lands. Fulcher's the only one that voted against it, the only one. And then when you learn that his family at the time is starting up a luxury real estate development firm with the Trump family, and they're buying up riverfront property out of Owyhee County. Now, I should clarify, Barron Trump has left that company. He decided to go into crypto. He left luxury real estate development firm with the Fulcher family. But the Fulcher family is still developing in some of these pristine, wild areas. So they have a very good reason to vote against.
How in the hell does Barron Trump cross paths with Fulcher to start a company together in luxury real estate? I got to know how that happens.
I should say Russ Fulcher is not Fulcher's family. So it's
Fulcher's
Fulcher's
family.
family has been in
Even
commercial
more.
real estate for a very long time. Yeah, very, very long time. When Russ Fulcher left being an Idaho state senator for a few years, he retired from being a state senator. He went into commercial real estate alongside his family. He has cousins and nephews, and they're all kind of in the commercial real estate business. So Fulcher is deceptively flying under the radar. He is incredibly close to Trump. He is incredibly close to the Trump family. He is in that inner circle. He is close with Andy Biggs and Jim Jordan and the Freedom Caucus members who have been in Trump's inner circle. Fulcher is very, very closely aligned with these interests. And then on top of that, when I started this campaign, Fulcher had never shown up in Idaho's first congressional district. He would do his fancy fundraisers in Kootenai County with Brent Reagan, which, I mean, North Idaho taught me a lot about what I needed to know in this campaign. Fulcher sat on the board of directors for the Freedom Foundation. He's incredibly close to Sheriff Bob Norris. He's incredibly good friends with Brent Reagan. He does his $500 plate or $1,000 fundraising galas. He stays at Tamarack Resort. He stays at Coeur d'Alene Resort, or he goes back to DC where he has his luxury lunches. But the vast majority of his money comes from corporations, private mining, private energy interests that use Idaho's federal lands. It's just, he's the definition of an absent, corrupt politician in my perspective. And even the Republicans who supported Fulcher hadn't seen Fulcher. And Fulcher had done absolutely nothing about the issues that they were actually dealing with on the ground. In fact, that he exacerbated them. He made them worse. And he did so under the guise of trying to cut down on federal spending and reduce our deficit and all of these trigger words. But then at the same time, he actually increased our national deficit. He actually increased the amount of federal tax dollars he hand out to corporations and billionaires. He actually gave tax cuts to those who need it least and did nothing for Idaho businesses and Idaho farmers. The tariff policy was disastrous for Idaho farmers. Where was Russ Fulcher when this was happening? That's where it was like, this is the race that I need to go in. There are people who will ask why I didn't go for a local race first, but in 2022, they already had candidates here in District 14 where I live. So they couldn't find anybody who's willing to run at the federal level. And for those who don't know my district is 500 miles. It is the largest district in the country by population with almost 1.2 million people. It goes from the Canadian border all the way down to Nevada. It's all of North and Central Idaho. So they're to step into this race. And then on top of that, to get to hold Fulcher specifically accountable. I think it's what made this race so attractive to me and made me want to run a particular district.
Yeah. You know, Fulcher has not earned brownie points with me. I'll probably differ from you on this, but during COVID, when they stopped the biggest, most successful economy in the world, 15 days to stop the spread. So we're going to shut everything down, but we're going to let big corporations continue to run, but mom and pop stores can't. You're going to be told you're either essential or not essential. And during this time when you stop the economy, which was already leaning towards a lean manufacturing model just in time, they broke a lot of our supply chains. And then their response is, oh, okay, now we're going to print $2 trillion and we're going to give it all back to you guys. And I look at this foolery that these guys are involved with. Personal opinion, that's my stance on what they did during COVID, but also voting to continue to fund the Iran war. And I haven't seen at any time Fulcher, he may have, I've not observed it, where he said, hey, isn't Congress supposed to get to vote whether or not we're going to war? And they keep hiding behind the same crap that they've done for the past 2 or 3 wars since the early 2000s. And I'm sick and tired of all of the National Defense Act continually getting rubber stamped while it erodes our civil liberties. And, you know, you're right. You say one thing on this side that I'm socially conservative, but yet your spending would betray that idea that you really are.
Yeah, I'm going to say the quiet part out loud. I was really shocked at the conflict in Iran. I thought that the very one thing that this administration would do that I could get on board with was America First policy. Because that's how I would describe my policy, America First. We have watched 30 years of conflicts in the Middle East do absolutely nothing but devastate our economy, devastate servicemen and women, do absolute nothing beneficial in the Middle East or in these countries. And so the war in Iran was shocking, to say the least. But then when you listen to Russ Fulcher talk about his relationship to Israel and AIPAC, I think it becomes really clear why he was rubber stamping the conflict in Iran and why he's been so supportive. I mean, he has said out loud in the state of Idaho that God calls on him to do everything he can for Israel. He takes $50,000 a year from back. And this is a man who hasn't campaigned a day in 8 years. So I think that's where his loyalty lies with the decisions that he's making. And that's where I really get to go in and say, this is why we need to be careful who kids get money from and who they're listening to. Because if you're not listening to Idaho businesses and American manufacturers and all of these really important like trade deals and this, then of course you're going to make decisions that are disastrous for entrepreneurs and business owners and the everyman during COVID. When you're listening to Israel over the needs of your own constituents, of course you're going to funnel $100 billion into a needless conflict in Iran, and you're going to send servicemen and women to die for somebody else's war. I mean, that's what this is. America had absolutely no reason. If you want to say we wanted to go over there to crush an authoritarian government, we didn't. We actually just instilled an even more bloodthirsty and younger.
I thought we got the job done last year, a year ago. I thought we took out the nuclear capabilities. I've been listening to this rhetoric for well over 20 years. I've been reading about it for 20 years. I remember right on the heels of the Iraq invasion in 2003, they were already telling us we're going to get on another front and we're going to go to war in Iran. And yet we hear the administration say, yeah, we got them. And then it's going to be a 2 or 3 day war and then a 15-day war. And now the economy is more screwed up than it was because the economy never recovered after COVID. And I think that both Republicans and Democrats, because Democrats were in charge the last term, before Trump, there was a lot of things that were screwed up. But I don't understand the endless wars and the funding of this at the expense. Who's paying? I don't even know how they can even keep track of who owes what to who anymore.
They can't. And that's it. Like when I criticize our defense budget, I'm not criticizing a budget that goes to safe equipment and the things that our troops need in order. I'm criticizing the money that disappears into no bid contracts with military contractors that profit off of these conflicts and often have a lot to say when we make these decisions. And I want to bring our country back to the point. I mean, FDR didn't even throw the US into World War II until Japan actually bombed our shores. And I would like America to have that kind of focus again on our constituents, our people, our issues, our trade. I would like to make sure that federal tax dollars are going into American manufacturing, are going into breaking up monopolies so that Idaho businesses and farmers can be successful. Make sure that we don't have monopolized big ag who are taking up ag subsidies meant for local. Like there are so many priorities here that are America focusing on. But as long as we have politicians like Russ Fulcher in office, then we're never going to get that perspective because he's not here in Idaho listening to Idaho voters. He's back in DC listening to lobbyists who, I mean, the man has over $850,000 in his campaign, and he hasn't been here and campaigned in nearly 8 years. The first time Russ Fulcher held a public town hall, it was because I had held several dozen town halls and we were finally starting to get press and media attention. I held what I called Republican town halls. And I went to Grangeville and Kamiah and Lewiston and Coeur d'Alene. And I asked Republican voters to come question the Democrat. Tell me what worries you about the D next to my name. Let's talk policy. And that gained so much traction that all of a sudden Russ Fulcher held his first public town hall in Lewiston in 2023. And then he went to Kamiah and then he went to Grangeville. Followed me to Sandpoint. And so I I just want the American people to have a representative back in Congress that sees these issues the same way that they do, that only has a tether to the voters that put them in office. And here's the deal that I make with most Idahoans is, you don't have to call yourself a Democrat, right? I'm not asking you to change your party status. I'm not even asking you to believe me that I can accomplish this. But if you want to show the GOP that you want better candidates, if you want to show Congress that you're not going to put up with this anymore, then we have to be willing to vote out corrupt politicians that aren't doing their job. And then with the D next to my name, I would be the easiest politician in America to vote out of office if I did not fulfill the promises that I made to the people here, if I did not behave the way that I promised I said I was going to. It would be easy to unseat me like that. So it's just, I'm passionate about it. I mean, you'd have to be to run for 5 or 6 years without actually making any money or doing anything. But the corruption is just hard to watch because I hear these stories from the Idahoans I meet. I just got done with a 7-day tour across northern Idaho, and the people I meet, their stories are real. I still remember the first time I went to Riggins. I didn't have a single contact in Riggins that I could call up and try to organize something. So at the end of a campaign trip, I stopped in Riggins on a Sunday evening. I went into the Seven Devils Saloon and I walked in and I said, I'm a Democrat running for Congress. Talk to me about what's happening locally. Let me hear what's going on. And there was a man in that saloon. And he was frail. He was a much older, smaller man. And he's wearing a Trump hat and he's wearing his Trump shirt, the ones with like the tank and the bald eagle. And Trump's got the giant gun. And he's got a 3 percenters tattoo on his forearm. And we're talking and he's telling me about how he voted for Trump because he wanted somebody that was going to fight the system for him. But he's a veteran who's sleeping on a friend's couch because his fixed income isn't enough to afford an apartment or a place of his own, that he has a terminal illness, that his health insurance barely even covers palliative care, that he can't find a ride to his physician because there aren't any local providers that can cover him. And this man who's facing down death, who served his country, is asking me not to forget him. And he's not alone in that. That's the average experience. The people across the state are amazing, good-hearted people who are working as hard as they can to do good for their family and their community. And they just want people in government to remember them when they're making those votes and to remember them when they're leading and representing this district back in Congress. And I carry those with me. And so then when you see Fulcher do what he does, or you listen to whatever corrupt politician is on whatever mainstream media lying about, it's difficult to listen to. And I think the anger probably helps drive me a little bit.
I can understand that. Talking big questions as we start to wrap this down. You and I are in agreement. We are done with the parties and the corruption on both sides. For myself and Donna, and for our loyal listeners and those that watch us each and every week, we talk about liberty without compromise. And it goes back to the fundamentals of what the founders had to say when they would quote those like the great philosopher from England 100 years before the founders, John Locke. The laws of nature, and nature is God. All men are created equal in worth, and all men have the right to life, liberty, and property. We are facing, in my opinion, some of the most dangerous times that Americans have ever lived. While George Washington, the Continental Army, could reasonably take on the greatest military at that time, which was Great Britain, musket to musket, cannon to cannon, we don't have that same ability today with what we see in the surveillance state. There is a big push, as you are already well aware of, Flock and Motorola and Axon cameras that are just scanning license plates just in case. It's not a violation of the Fourth Amendment, according to Flock, who is cataloging all of these images and videos, and they're sharing them across the lines. What's your position on the surveillance state and things like ALPRs and data centers?
This one's really easy for me because I'm against all of it unilaterally. Our campaign just saw Russ Fulcher go on mainstream media And he was talking about privacy, and I assumed flock cameras or about consumer data and tech giants and conglomerates and data centers, but he wasn't. He was complaining that the DOJ served a warrant and watched his texts with Trump back in 2021. And that's all he talked about that entire segment. Well, he said nothing about flock cameras or data centers or consumer data. What is happening right now is that the law is about 30 years behind digital and tech advancement. And unless we have a Congress that is willing to bring the law up to date on privacy standards and tech standards that protect consumers and that protect individuals, then we are never going to be in a situation where we have some semblance of balance again. And unfortunately, we have an administration and a Congress that is not only unwilling to bring the law back up to date and protect consumers, but is actually willing to sell out. And it seems like we're intertwining these tech bros with our military and our Department of Defense.
Yeah.
We have insiders who have shares of these tech companies that are getting no bid contracts with the US government. And nobody's doing anything about the flock cameras that require no warrant, that are privately owned and allow private individuals access to our data, our Bluetooth, our phones, our cars, our locations. It's unacceptable. So for me, it's not only, I mean, let's talk, if you want to have law enforcement that has cameras where you require a warrant, where you require due process in order to access information, I'm willing to have that conversation. But otherwise, I want to bring the law up to date. I want to protect every single individual and consumer. So than that, I want to go even bigger. I don't think we understand the way that these tech giants and corporations are collecting data on us, whether it's from our phones, our computers, our commercials, our televisions, our smart devices. I want to make sure that we're protected in all of these areas, and I'm willing to dive in and write the legislation that does just that.
First Amendment. We're seeing a big push that you and your words can be considered now hate crimes. There was legislation that was attempted in Florida. We were just talking with Dr. John Padfield last week. We had a conference with him and some personal time. And he reminded us about the Republican in Florida that attempted to write legislation of labeling Americans and their behaviors as terrorists. Back in the 60s, I think people called that the anti-government or the people that believed in true civil liberties, the First Amendment. What's your take on hate speech and the continual regulation on it by not only the federal government, but local?
It's funny to me because on both sides of the aisle, both sides have examples of this where freedom of speech has been infringed upon. And I think sometimes it's easy when we look at these amendments to read them in a way that's favorable to our side, are looking at up to 50 years in jail because of definitions that are being written around the words that we use. In the UK, British protesters that had a poster board that said Free Palestine were facing jail time for treason. I mean, that's what that looks like when we don't have the First Amendment to protect us. So for me, the words you use, the government should have no capability of any kind of criminal prosecution, any kind of recourse against you for the language you use, the words that you use. Of course, you know, you can't run into a crowded building and yell fire with the hopes to start a stampede. You can't, you know, call somebody over and over again and threaten to kill them. Those are really about the only kind of things there. But I respect the way our Constitution was written in such a great way, mainly because I grew up reading about the philosophers. You brought up John Locke. I used to use Locke nonstop. I was a speech and debate kid. I used Locke as my criterion for nearly 50% of the cases that I debated, right? Montesquieu and the three branches of government that were used through French philosophers, and the way that they intertwined all of these elements was so particular. Our freedom of religion that keeps the government out of our faith, that no man can define your relationship to God or to this world, that no man can define how you define yourself. These are instrumental into protecting the future of our liberties and our independence. I think sometimes there are political arguments that are used to try and get the American people on side of regulating these freedoms and liberties. I want to get the government out of that. I want the government to focus on the economy, on infrastructure, on our budget and our deficit, and get out of the way that we use free speech, out of our religious beliefs, out of these constitutionally protected aspects of who we are as individuals.
Yeah, I know that I've taken a lot of flack for the past year and a half of defending a Democrat, Teresa Bornpool, who was at the now infamous town hall by the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee. And while I did not agree with her tactics, I didn't agree with the general demeanor, what I saw, and I'll get blasted again saying this, because when you identify yourself as a conservative or part of MAGA or Republican or whatever else, that means that everybody else that doesn't believe the same as you automatically is an enemy, and their civil rights deserve to be violated. And I believe that if one person doesn't matter, then nobody matters. Everybody matters or nobody matters. So, I mean, I love to see the debate back and forth. I know that we're running short on time, and I would love to have more discussion with you, because I enjoy having discussions with people that don't believe identically to myself. It allows me to build up my ability to really reinforce, do I really believe, or am I skewed? Am I biased? And I love also the potential to sway somebody over by my argument. And I tell people this over and over again. The culture stuff matters. It absolutely does. But if we right now at this time and place in history do not secure our liberty, none of that stuff's going to matter. If we can't keep our person, places, and effects secure, if we can't be secure in those, if we can't be secure in what we say and who we associate with, if we can't keep our guns, if we can't keep to not incriminating ourselves and to our due process that we have seen many deprived of, then none of this social stuff is going to matter. So I really appreciate the fact that you have stated for the record your belief in free speech being, I believe, absolute, and in your Second Amendment rights, and again in the Fourth Amendment being sacred. Would you be willing to come back on, continue this conversation as you continue down the campaign trail?
Anytime. These are the conversations I love. And I love the fact that you enjoy those different perspectives, because it's made me grow as an individual. It's made me expand the way I understand policy and federal government, and my understanding of the culture war issues and how other people view them. I think I am only a better candidate and individual for having conversations that go far beyond my understanding of the world. So anytime you want me on the show, I will be here. I mean, anytime. I say that while I'm running a 24/7 campaign, but anytime I have a spare hour and a half. Yeah, and two kids and a husband who's an absolute saint of a human being. I should just
I'd love to meet him.
My husband, yeah, he's a good man. He's the best. I couldn't do what I do without him. So
tell the viewers how they can find out more about you. What's your websites?
It's really easy. I am the only Kaylee running for office in all of America. So if you go to Kaylee for Congress, I'm the only person that you'll find. KayleeFor Congress.com. I'm also on social media. I'm on most social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all the big ones. But the biggest thing is I don't want to be a politician that isn't accessible. So if somebody has questions, if they want me to delve deeper into the policy, if they're confused about something that they see on social media or it rubs them the wrong way, send me a message, shoot me an email, call, or ask me to come out to talk to you and your friends, or you and your group, or you and your friend. I will make the drive. That's what this campaign is about, is trying to make politics open and accessible to people again, whether you agree with me or not. And so, yeah, hopefully they'll check me out and they don't hate what they see too much.
next time when we have you on, I want to dive in more to this whole, it seems to be the tactic, whether it's Republican, Democrat, doesn't matter. The incumbents refusing to acknowledge and to debate their opponents. If they are so great, so high speed, why are they so afraid of those that would challenge them? Or do they think they're king? So that's something we're going to talk about next time. And folks, I would encourage you to go check out Kaylee and what she is currently saying on the campaign trail, what she stands for. You know that we don't endorse anyone on this broadcast. We are fully supportive of those that get out to make a difference in their community, that stand on their convictions, that adhere to the principles of the founders, and above all else, that are for liberty without compromise. Kaylee, thank you so much for your time tonight. May God bless you and be safe on the campaign trail.
Thank you so much, Dan and Donna. Thanks for giving me the platform and a great conversation. I look forward to talking next time.
Let's have a short little conversation as we wrap up tonight. Liberty without compromise allows people of different beliefs to be guests if there can be a civil conversation that takes place, with a few exceptions. My concern right now is that many of you out there are still being duped by these labels: right, left, Democrat, Republican, etc. And here's the fallacy in this. While you're concerned about all these cultural things, which again, you already know my stance on the cultural issues. They are very important. But it's like you have a house and the plumbing is backed up. There's a problem with the lines. It's not draining into the septic field. And you're out there scooping all the shit up and putting it in the garbage can or putting it in the tub or wherever else you're trying to get rid of it without fixing the freaking problem. You may feel good about it, but you're not fixing the problem. And the problem is this, people: your liberty. If you don't secure yourself against Fourth Amendment violations, which Flock is definitely a Fourth Amendment violation, the government has no fucking business following you for any reason when you are going about your business, unless they have a criminal reason to investigate as they can articulate. Mass surveillance does not cut that. If your speech is not free to say whatever it is that you want to say, in whatever manner you want to say it, if you believe that the government is the great arbiter and whoever's in office at the time or in your local communities to tell you what you can or cannot say, that is a problem. And while all you guys are shoveling the shit back between conservative versus Democrat, your liberty is being taken away by both the Democrats and the Republicans. And I'm done. I'm done with politicians that say the typical echo chamber bullshit. I'm a conservative. I stand for these things. These are all the cultural things that I'm going to fight. They don't move the dial, by the way. But at the same time, they're selling out your very liberty. And let's talk about the hypocrisy. Those of you that are pissed off that I would bring on a self-proclaimed Democrat running for office, and that I'm a Democrat, shows how weak, what a weak-minded individual you are, a dishonest individual. Many of you will sit there and say, and by the way, we didn't talk about any of the social issues because at this point, none of that matters if your liberty is not secure. Secure your liberty, then go fight the culture battle. But let's talk about here locally. You have conservative Catholic Christians that are saying we're all for family values, but they're frequenting massage parlors where people are most likely human trafficked, and they are allowing sexual acts to take place, and they keep going back while they claim we have nothing to do with it. And they were supported even when this revelation was revealed, even though they said they had no experience in the position that they wanted to. And yet, because they're a Christian conservative and Republican, you guys turned your heads away from the deplorable, despicable, evil behavior because you have to support somebody that's Republican. Let's go to the churches. You want to talk about men that claim that they are shepherds? They're conservatives. They support the local Republican Party, and yet they do nothing with sexual abuse that is taking place among the membership in their church. They will not take a stand on it, but they'll get up there and they will virtue signal and they will give these long, lofty prayers in the public, asking for God's blessings, asking to turn away the evil in the culture while they are participating in evil deeds themselves, while they call themselves a Republican. You guys are all being duped. I will fight for liberty across the board. What is better? Somebody that is honest where they stand socially, but says, I will stand for liberty. I am on the record for being a staunch defender of the First Amendment, Second Amendment, Fourth Amendment, so on. Or somebody that claims they are, but at the same time, they're doing evil things. How hypocritical, how evil is that while they claim to be followers of Christ? They claim to be conservatives, but they're dishonest. We didn't descend from fearful men. We descended from men who understood about liberty. They understood that they had a chance that had never taken place in history before for men to govern themselves, to put barriers in place at federal and state and local levels to secure man's God-given rights of life, liberty, and property. I will never apologize for having conversations with people that don't align with me 100%, but will stand up for liberty.
Well, I think that about does it. Wraps up another edition of Liberty Without Compromise, brought to you by the Liberty Without Compromise Network. Huge thank you for everybody who joined us live tonight. You all participated in the discussion. We appreciate that. And for those of you who shared the broadcast, you can continue to do that. The replay will be available right after we're done here tonight. And we really do appreciate every single one of you. Special thank you to Kaylee Peterson for joining us and taking the time to answer our questions. We will have her back. More to ask, I'm sure. Whether you agreed with everything discussed tonight or not, we hope the conversation gave you something to think about. That's what this program's all about.
It is.
What'd you have to say there?
Well, when we bring her back next time, we're going to open it up for discussion.
Live Q&A.
You guys can ask the hard questions because Sean Ryan or Tucker or any of the other talking heads, I didn't ask enough hard questions.
You're not asking any hard questions. We saw that tonight. So we will have her back and she will be live and we'll take those questions and give them to her in real time. If you enjoyed tonight's show, please subscribe or follow us on YouTube, Facebook, X, and Instagram. A lot of you joining us by X tonight. Thank you for that. Share this episode with somebody who appreciates the thoughtful conversations about the issues affecting North Idaho and even beyond, as Kaylee described. If you're watching the replay, we'd still love to hear your thoughts, so leave us a comment. We get those as well. We read them all. We really do. You can also find previous episodes and interviews on our YouTube channel. That is at the Idaho Sheriff, so subscribe to that channel. Everything is archived there. And if you missed any of our other past conversations, be sure to check those out so you have Dan Wilson in context. Thanks again for spending your evening with us. We're going to see you next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific time for another edition of Liberty Without Compromise. I'm going to bring this back up on the screen again. for the ALP, no smoke, no spit, no compromise.
No compromise. I'm going to smoke a couple of my fathers here in just about 10 minutes.
You're heading in that direction. Yeah.
Hey, remember to pray for Jim, my good brother, and for Wendy, and for all of those that are going through extremely difficult times. There is a God in heaven. He does hear our petitions, especially when they're on behalf of others. We're going to have a special episode coming up. We're going to rile all of you up.
Oh, boy.
We have a guest, Teresa Roth, coming back on to talk to us about Freemasons and Freemasons in Kootenai County. We'll get all of you all riled up because, we talk to everybody. Let everybody
tell us. Well, you talk to almost everybody.
Well, unless they're dipshits, and then
there is a qualifier.
It's an automatic disqualifier, especially if they're funded by the Southern Poverty Law Center and are not an FBI agent, but rather a confidential human source. Different. You're not on the payroll as an investigator.
Use that QR code for your supply of ALP. Lots of different flavors, different milligrams, and even caffeine pouches. Those are great. Use the QR code there. You get a discount and help support this program.
Let's get out of here.
Yeah, we're going to see you next week.